Pretty Girl Club. Welcome back to the Decentering Men series. And in this episode, we are going to talk about how most men are addicted to 304s, hoes, sex workers, modern women. So they're actually addicted to these types of women, yet they have a desire to shame them for their behaviors. So have you ever noticed that when a woman is an ex-worker, let's say she does OnlyFans or something like that, men will be quick to shame her, but they have no smoke for the men who are spending millions of dollars on Sophie Rain. They have no smoke for the men who own OnlyFans and created it. They have no smoke for the men who created the porn industry as a whole. So pretty women are the scapegoat. And I've noticed that part of the envy that a lot of men have is for the options that these women have. They're mad because these women are so desirable and men are so addicted to sex to the point where these women can have the option to make millions of dollars off of their body without even having to sleep with anyone. So a lot of men are actually threatened by women's economic upward mobility. And another hypocrisy is they'll say things like, oh, we don't care what you do for a living. We don't care about your career. Okay, so then why do you care about women who are ex-workers? You just said you don't care what they do for a living. So which one is it? And something else that they'll try to say to women is like, oh, you're a 6 or you're a 5 or you're average at best. Okay, well, clearly they're not average at best because these quote unquote average women, they're out here making millions, working at the clubs, working on OF, being IG baddies and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, if that's what being a 5 is or being a 6 or being a 6 at best, why are these women richer than you then? Another hypocrisy is that men in the red pill spaces, they will shame women for not being married. They'll shame women for not being wifey material, but then they never pull up an example of the type of woman who is wifey material. They never pull up examples and say, this woman right here is a 10 out of 10 in terms of looks. She's a 10 out of 10 in terms of personality. She is wifey material. This is what all the women should aspire to be like. They never have examples of what the quote-unquote correct woman actually is. So it's very similar to the divestors. You know how they have this limerence over the magical white man? A lot of red pill guys, they have limerence over this magical, wholesome, yet sexy, yet slutty, yet 50-50, yet submissive women. So they have limerence over something that does not exist. They're actually just like their counterparts, unambiguous black women who are divestors. They're just like their counterparts. So they have all this smoke for the hypergamy women, but a lot of these men, they are hypergamous in terms of appearance. They're hypergamous in terms of body count. They want a woman who has less sexual experience than him because it means that she has more sexual value because, you know, she hasn't been defiled by a lot of men. So they're basing a woman's worth and value on her body count. Meanwhile, the woman really could just lie. She could just lie about her body count. She can do the same thing men do and lie. She can do the same thing that men do and manipulate. And then another thing is they'll say that a woman is wifey material when she is 50-50. So they're actually exposing their codependency. He cannot afford the lifestyle that he wants. And so he needs you to go half with him to prove your love to him. You have to prove your love to him financially. Meanwhile, if you say that you want him to prove his love to you by being financially generous, he'll say that you're a gold digger. So do you see how women are the gold diggers, but men are not? Another thing about men is that a lot of men, there's actually a stat that says most men can't even go more than 30 days without looking at porn. Okay, so the average man, no matter who he is, no matter what race he is, no matter how old he is, he has looked at porn in the past 30 days. So you're telling me that not only is it that we are not enough in terms of looks, because, you know, we're 5s at best, we're 6s at best, we have to wear makeup and weaves and filters and whatever, we're not that pretty. Okay, so not only are we not good enough in looks, you don't care about our careers, so that means that our careers are not enough, but now we're also not enough sexually, because men will say that they need variety and novelty. So why should I dedicate my life to someone where everything about me is not enough, according to his own talking points? And if you look at a lot of the male content creators, a lot of their channels are focused on the bad behaviors of pretty women. I've also noticed they have an obsession with beautiful women, obviously. That's who they're watching the most because those are the girls that they actually want. They want the Lori Harveys to be their wives. You know, they want They want a Lori Harvey with a Mother Teresa type of personality, but still with the slutty side as well. So essentially they want to build a bitch, and they're searching for something that doesn't actually exist. They have unrealistic expectations on women, and they also have a severe case of limerence. And so these guys, I would actually call these guys incels, because they're similar to their counterparts, which are the femcel women who have this limerence. So a lot of these incel guys, if you dive into their psychology, a lot of these men have toxic mothers. And if you listen to their content, you'll hear them talk about how toxic their own mothers are. You'll hear some of them talk about how their own mom was a baby mama and she was like ratchet and she abused him and stuff. So a lot of these guys have mommy issues. They'll talk about women for having daddy issues, but these guys have mommy issues. They have abandonment issues from their own mothers. A lot of these men view their own mothers as being whores and 304s and having hit the wall. So it's like, okay, if that's how you view your own mother, how am I supposed to believe that suddenly you're going to show me all this love and respect? Because I can keep the same energy. They talk crap about women having bad relationships with their fathers, but it's like half of you guys have bad relationships with your own mothers. And if your mother is such an upstanding woman, why don't you bring your mother on to your live streams so that she can talk about what it's like being a high-value woman? Because according to their own talking points, their own mothers have hit the wall. Their own mothers are average at best, or they're below average, or they are less valuable because they have like a child outside of wedlock or whatever the case may be. So it's like you have all these standards on women. You can't name an example of this magical woman who meets all of these standards. Not even your own mother can meet these standards. You don't have healthy relationships with your mothers, yet you're supposed to make me believe that you know how to be in a healthy relationship yourself. Do you see the extreme hypocrisy? Another thing that I've noticed too about a lot of men is that whenever a woman enforces boundaries, they will call that nagging. So it's like if you ask him to take out the trash, you're nagging. If you ask him to remember a birthday or put something on the calendar, that's nagging. If you don't want him texting other women, you're being controlling. If you don't want him in other women's DMs, that's controlling and you're insecure. But if the tables were turned, think about how a man would react if you had one man in your phone. If you opened your phone screen and it said Tyrone on there, think about how the average man would react. If you slid into a guy's DMs, or if you put heart eyes under a guy's post on Instagram, some buff guy, you know how they follow like IG baddies where they show themselves in bikinis and stuff. So think about if you were following some buff fitness influencer guy and then you're putting heart eyes and fire emojis under his pictures, how do you think the average man would react? Because we've talked about this before. Most men are emotionally unstable. And we know this because, first of all, men are 16 times more likely to commit a violent crime. Men are more likely to unalive themselves and others. Okay, so that's not an emotionally stable group then. You can't convince me that men are more emotionally stable and logical if they do all of these unlogical behaviors. Look at the history of how men have behaved throughout time. Men will literally invade other countries and enslave and R-word people so that they can just overtake. They'll do it all for like money and status. But I'm supposed to believe that this same gender is the most logical. Please tell me how it makes logical sense to unalive yourself and others and to SA other people and to have groups where there are 70,000 men planning how to SA their own mothers. I'm supposed to believe that men are more emotionally stable and logical. So they'll have these YouTube channels where they're just highlighting all of the bad behaviors of women. So like I said, very similar to divestors, where they make all these YouTube channels where it's solely talking about black men and all of their bad behavior. And it's like, okay, so you're black male centered then. Because if all your behavior is still just talking about what men are doing, then you're still being male centered. If you're talking about this celebrity and how he doesn't date people like you, okay, it's because you desire that person. So the men who are talking about Lori Harvey, they're talking about Roxy or all these other female celebrities who clearly have pretty privilege and they have leverage, it's because they actually want those types of women. They have limerence over these types of women. And so they have kind of like this fantasy in their mind of the perfect woman. But of course, they've never come across that woman. Most of these guys have never even had girlfriends before. Because think about it, if you're trapped in a state of limerence, people use limerence as a form of escapism. So a lot of this content for men, it's almost like emotional corn for men. So it's like soothing the male ego. It's kind of like soothing their loneliness. You know how they say there's a male loneliness epidemic? By the way, if men are supposed to be more logical, shouldn't they know how to solve the male loneliness epidemic themselves? They should be able to build communities. I thought that men were natural protectors and providers and builders. So why are men so lonely? They should be building communities. They should be building support groups for one another. They should be building men's shelters for all the crackheads who are out on the streets right now. All of those men who are destitute and following women home. Where are the communities that men have built for those types of men? Since men are the protectors, providers, the builders, and they're so logical, and they're so much more emotionally stable than women. And by the way, you know how men try to say like, oh, women are just too emotional. They only listen to their emotions. Okay, if you don't listen to your emotions, or if you completely drown out your emotions, you do know that that is the definition of being a sociopath or a psychopath, right? Only sociopathic people are the ones who completely cut off their emotions altogether. The ones who completely minimize and devalue emotions the most, those are the ones who are most likely to be criminals. They're most likely to abuse women. So the fact that you're even promoting not having emotions, you're actually promoting mental illness. Just saying. And that leads me to my next point, which is that a lot of men are bad at delayed gratification. Okay, they need instant gratification. So that is why they will always rely on ex-workers. They will always rely on AI robots and AI girlfriends, or, you know, the people on Instagram or whatever, the chat rooms and stuff. It's because that's a form of instant gratification where he doesn't have to engage his emotions. He doesn't have to deal with the complex emotions that come from dealing with a woman in real life. So like I said, these guys are really incels. They're really incels who are starved for validation. I talked in some of my previous videos about how most men are validation starved, and a lot of men are also touch starved as well, because the only touch they're used to receiving is the touch from their own hand, or a touch from a piece of plastic that they bought in a store. Men on average are not good at building communities. If you think about women, a lot of women, we will like hang out with our sisters, with our cousins. We will make new friends at yoga class. You know, women are much better at building communities, not to mention the fact that a lot of women are very intuitive and we are very aware of other women's emotions. Part of this is because women tend to be more nurturing on average than men. If you think about male friendships, most male friendships can be extremely toxic to the point of physical abuse. A lot of men will fight each other over a card game. They will fight each other over a pool game. They will fight each other over a football game. They'll punch each other in the face and then they'll say, oh, we're still friends. So men are used to toxic relationships because they have toxic relationships with their own brothers. They have toxic relationships with their own friends. Men will become best friends with their own bullies and their own ops. And this is why you have them talking about homie hoppers. It takes two people to have sex. So if your girlfriend slept with your homie, that means that your homeboy had to agree to sleep with her as well. So it's not just only the girl that's the villain, like she's just so powerful. Her seduction skills are just so powerful that he just couldn't help himself. No. So most men are actually surrounded by toxic relationships because they're not even emotionally intelligent enough to be able to tell who's a real friend, who's a fake friend. Is my dad a covert narc? Is my mom a narcissist? A lot of men, they're not even thinking about stuff like that. They're just focused on survival. And this is because a lot of men actually tend to be defined based on like how much money they make, what type of job they have. And so a lot of them devalue their emotions, which is why they stay in these toxic friendships with their childhood friends. In fact, most men don't even stay friends with their childhood friends. A lot of men have no friends at all. No friends, no brothers that they're close to. Think about it. Think about guys that have been your friend. Do those guys text you on a daily basis and ask you how you're feeling emotionally? Do they check in with you emotionally or sit on the phone with you and discuss all of your deepest traumas and act as a free therapist? No. That's the type of behavior a woman would do. So most men, they're not emotionally available for their own male friends. And so what are men really getting out of these friendships with other males? They're not getting that much out of it, at least not as much as a lot of women do. And for the people who try to say, like, oh no, men's friendships last longer than women's, men stay friends forever, women don't. Have you ever thought that that's because maybe women are better at enforcing their boundaries? Maybe women are better at emotional boundaries. That's why they're willing to cut off toxic women from their lives. A lot of men have no emotional boundaries. That's why they end up cheating. Cheating is not just a lack of physical boundaries, but it's also a lack of emotional boundaries. You don't know how to determine what emotions are toxic and what emotions are okay. And so that's why a lot of men, they end up cheating, or they think that emotional cheating is not even real. So they'll have a whole girlfriend online. They'll be going back and forth via FaceTime with another woman. They'll have a woman that they're sexting on the side, and then they'll say, oh, that's not really real because it's just emotional. So have you ever stopped to think that maybe the reason that some male friendships last for so long is because a lot of men, they're scared of change, they're extremely codependent, and so they'd rather just stay in a toxic relationship with their male friend rather than ending the friendship? At least women have the boundaries to say, hey, I'm going to cut you off. It takes courage to be able to cut someone off that's been your friend. It takes courage and strength to be able to have the emotional independence and autonomy to set boundaries. A lot of men don't have that, and that's why they quote unquote fall into temptation, which is really he just had no emotional boundaries. So he lets his female friend come over his house at night even though he has a wife. That's a sign of no emotional boundaries. He let his friend Tyrone punch him in the face after basketball, and then he stayed friends with him. No emotional boundaries. He let his friend borrow money from him when they were in college, and his friend still owes him money, still hasn't paid him back, and he allows that man to stay in his life. No boundaries. So the only reason a lot of men tend to stay friends longer is because they simply have no boundaries. They are simply scared to leave. A lot of men are the ones who have the fear of dying alone and the fear of nobody remembering them. And I don't know if you guys have seen all of those videos of the women who work in the morgues, and they talk about how most of the unidentified bodies are actually the bodies of men. And back to the friendship talking point, another reason why male friendships last longer than women's is because a lot of men have much lower standards and expectations than women do. So again, that goes back to lack of boundaries. A man's standard for being his friend is, oh, just be around. Just be there. Just be a warm body in the same room as me. Most women have much higher friendship standards than that. So it's not our fault as women that you guys have low expectations. That's why you're still friends with the guy who smashed your girlfriend a couple years ago. That's why you're still friends with your biggest op and your biggest hater. And another thing about men too is that sometimes men can be extremely competitive, so they think it's normal. They think that this toxic competition is normal. It's normalized for them to compare themselves to one another. It's normalized for them to still feel isolated, even if they have friends. And it's like, okay, if men were so good at friendship, and if all their friendships last longer than women's, then there wouldn't be a male loneliness epidemic. You wouldn't be lonely because you have all your male friends, right? Because you guys are so good at friendships. Not to mention the fact that whatever a man calls a friend, usually when men hang out, they tend to hang out in like a group. So maybe they'll hang out in a large group. Maybe there are 3 or 4 of them. Maybe they used to be high school buddies or something. And a lot of male friendships are much less emotionally intimate than female friendships. And so there's not as much of an emotional stake in the friendship. So that's why men could have 20, 30, or 50 friends and still feel lonely. It's because you're not really their friend, bro. That's your acquaintance. That is a guy that you haven't seen in 25 years. Yet you're trying to make me believe that he is your friend. You haven't seen him in 25 years. You haven't talked to him in 15 years. You don't even know his kids' names. You're not even sure where he lives. Yet that's your bro, and that's your best friend. Do you see how low the standards are? But a lot of these lonely men, they end up either in limerence with women. So they'll have this fantasy about white women, Latina women, women from other countries, whatever it is. Whoever their object of limerence is, IG baddies, whatever. They'll have all of this limerence because limerence is used as a form of escapism. So I've talked in other episodes about how most men have bad coping mechanisms. The average man uses escapism as his way to cope with loneliness. So sometimes what he will do is he will go to the strip clubs, or he'll go to a bar, flirt with a bartender. He'll be soliciting ex-workers or going on porn sites because that's the only time he gets a dopamine hit. That's the only time he feels seen, is when the bartender looks over at him. It's when the stripper is sliding on the pole and giving him eye contact. That is when he feels the most seen. And I've also talked about how most men have no social life without women. For most men, their life is extremely uninteresting without the presence of a woman. That's why you see them making these 5-hour-long live streams about what the IG baddies are doing, what the actresses are doing, what the pop stars are doing. It's because he has no life outside of imagining what it would be like to have access to that kind of woman. So that's why they try to use shaming tactics. So they want to shame women into lowering their standards so that we can date guys like them. But then in the meantime, they will still say that even those women aren't good enough for him, because he'll be like, oh, she's a 6 when she takes off makeup, or, she had this surgery, she had a boob job, she's wearing a weave. So they'll even shame celebrity women and say that they're not as pretty as they think they are. And it's like, okay, so if no one is good enough for you, why do you even care what these women are doing? Why do you care what these ugly ass hoes are doing? If they're so far beneath you, and if you have no desire for them whatsoever, why are you keeping up with who they're dating? Why are you keeping up with their relationship status? I've never seen somebody keep up with the relationship status of someone they weren't attracted to. Because if you look at a lot of the YouTube videos that these guys make, they're not covering average ugly women. They're not covering all the obese, quote unquote, ugly women with alopecia and their lips are crusty, their teeth are messed up. They're not covering who those types of women are dating and dissecting and analyzing their dating lives. They're not complaining about 90% of women going after the top 10% of men. No, they're only complaining about the pretty women who go after the top 10%. They don't care what the ugly women are doing. Another hypocrisy is that men are very hypergamous. They will be hypergamous in terms of looks. They'll be hypergamous in terms of skin complexion or whiteness or hair texture, facial features, eye color, whatever his type is. He will be hypergamous in that area. He wants a woman who looks better than him. Men will be hypergamous in terms of status. They will complain like, why do all these famous women, why aren't they dating regular guys who are not famous? Okay, he wants to be hypergamous. He's really saying that he wants to be able to date a famous pop star. So he's hypergamous in terms of status. He wants someone with more fame than him, more popularity than him, so that he can essentially ride the coattails of her fame. Oh, and that leads me to my next point. Most men will actually chase after high status women so that he can attract other women. It makes him look good to be sitting next to Lori Harvey or Rihanna or, whatever, or some high status woman in his hometown or whatever. That makes other women attracted to him, because men say that women are attracted to the guys that other women are attracted to, right? Okay, so that means that he knows that if he gets a girlfriend or a wife, he has a higher chance of attracting other women, according to his own talking points. And this is why you see that phenomenon of married men being the most single. Because he knows that since he's married, he actually believes that since he's married, that you are more likely to be attracted to him and think that he's marriage material. And so that's what gives them that boldness and that ego boost to flirt with you at work. And a lot of us on this channel, we've had married men flirt with us at jobs. I mean, I've told you guys some of my stories. So a lot of married men are the most single men of them all. Because in some cases, they're only marrying these women so that she can pay 50% of his bills, and so he can get extra social status so that he can be viewed as marriage material to other women. And then he will go and try to flirt with these quote-unquote 304s. He'll go and flirt with the women at the strip club, even though he's married. He'll go and flirt with women on the sugar baby websites, even though he's married. So it's like you talked all this crap about 304s, and then you went and got married just so you can cheat on your wife with a 304. And this is exactly why you need to decenter them. Anyway, what do you ladies think? Let me know in the comment section, and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.